Hey guys, welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you're a subscriber, special thanks to all of my patrons. My name's Neil, and it's time for something bonus. A funny thing happened on the way to my 509 reaction, guys. I knew I had a lot of things to talk about. I thought I might go for 15 or 20 minutes in my preamble. You guys know me, you know that I can go on a little bit once I get revved up. I ended up going for more than 30 minutes before we even started watching episode 509. And it just seemed like such a massive preamble that had nothing to do with episode 509 at all, and everything to do with me trying to wrap my head around the first 8 episodes of season 5. That I felt it ought to be its own, call it a mid-season recap. And it can stand on its own as a little bit of bonus content for you true losties out there who really want to hear all of my theories, all of my thoughts. Those of you who love seeing me do the mental gymnastics to try and figure this show out. So, without further ado, here is that. Guys, I am loving season 5. It's so much fun. I have thrown suspension of disbelief out the window. Whatever the writers throw at me, I'm buying it because the story is so much fun. And I'm so psyched to see where it goes. But before we start playing episode 9, guys, we've got to do some dissecting. So buckle up, buckle in. This might be a 20-25 minute long preamble. Feel free to skip ahead if you don't want to hear my crazy theories, but I think you want to hear them. Okay, I have notes. I don't even know where to start. So this may be a little tangential, but so many questions and so many thoughts. First and foremost, let's talk about Flight 316. Ajira, Flight 316, Los Angeles to Guam. Because some crazy stuff happened that we really haven't acknowledged yet. Hurley got released from jail and ended up on the flight. Now we know Ben was working towards that with his lawyer. Maybe that's how Hurley got out, maybe not. But who told Hurley to get on the flight? Was it also the lawyer, or was somebody else involved? And why does Hurley have this guitar? Like, we've never seen him play guitar before. I mean, I get that it's a nod to Charlie, and I know that we were supposed to recreate the circumstances of 815 as best as possible. But who told him, hey, dude, bring a guitar? Just something in my head. Is it the same person that told Saeed he needed to be on the plane? And how, or did that person get Saeed captured knowing that he would end up being escorted onto the plane by a marshal? Or did they tell Saeed, you have to get yourself arrested so that you end up on this plane? Because again, we have to recreate the circumstances of 815 as best we can. And on 815, Kate was being escorted. Now it's Saeed. So who is this mysterious person working behind the scenes? I want to see details of these backstories. And of course, what exactly happened to Aaron? Now, we can assume that Claire's mother now has custody of Aaron, but we don't know that for sure. We really don't. And I've already raised my concerns about Penny and Desmond. Are they alive? Are they safe? We saw Ben prior to the flight. He was all bloodied up at the marina, presumably the marina where Desmond and Penny have birthed. But maybe not. Did they even sail to LA? We don't know. I'm just really worried that Ben killed Penny because Ben promised Widmore that he was going to do it. And Ben is very tenacious with his goals. So yeah, prelim questions about leading up to Flight 316. But let's talk about 316 itself now. The first hint we had of it, which I didn't put together when it happened, was when our island folk, Locke, Sawyer, Juliet, Dan, Miles, were flashing back and forth through time. They went back to the beach to Survivorville, and they saw it abandoned with 2 outriggers there. And in one of the outriggers, they found a plastic water bottle labeled Ajira. And we didn't know what that was, but it made sense that it was in the future. It was beyond January 2005 when the rescue and the island move happened. So that was our first hint at Ajira 316. Then we have the flight. When the plane is still in the air, we know at least Jack, Kate, and Hurley are flashed out of the plane and into 1977. Now we can, based on what Caesar said, we don't know exactly how many, but we know that multiple occurrences of that happened. He saw it happen to Hurley. Other people reported it happening. We don't know. I'm going to guess that it happened to Saeed and Son, but we don't know that for sure. We know that Locke and Ben and Frank are all in 2008. They stayed in the current timeline. And we also found out after our folks got flashed out of the plane that Frank managed to crash land the plane on the island. Or is it the little smaller island? Is it Hydra Island that he crashed on? We do know that when Locke was talking to one of the new survivors, there was what looked like our island across the water. So I think we might be on Hydra Island, but that's not confirmed. What is confirmed is that there is a hatch where they are, and it's one that we haven't seen before. So it might be part of Hydra Station, or it might be something else. But Caesar has kind of established himself as the leader of the new survivors. He's sort of adopted that Jack role. I have a pretty secure theory in my mind. He's Charles Widmore's man. Widmore would have wanted somebody on that plane, so he would have put somebody tailing Jack to go wherever he went. And if Jack gets on a plane, you better believe you end up on that plane too. And he would have been briefed on the nature of the island, because when he was rooting around in whatever station that was back in episode 7. He found maps of the island. He found what looked like the maps of the Pacific that showed the various locations that the island moves to and fro. And he didn't seem particularly surprised by any of that, or think that any of that information was particularly useful, which tells me he already knew it. Just a theory. But Widmore's man is leading the new survivors. And we also learned in the same episode, episode 7, when Locke went to New York to see Walt as Jeremy Bentham, Walt told him that he'd been having dreams about Locke, that he was wearing a suit on the island, and he was surrounded by people who wanted to hurt him. Now, we haven't seen any evidence of that on the island yet, but if the new survivors want to hurt Locke, that would sort of indicate that Caesar could be Widmore's man. Now, do we believe Ben, or do we believe Widmore, or do we distrust both of them? I'm sure that was a massive point of debate back in the day. I have that internal debate myself. I don't know what to think about who to trust, who to believe. The only thing that's essentially clear to me is that Locke is destined to be the next leader / protector of the island. And both Ben and Widmore want to be the man behind the scenes. Who's got better motivation? I don't know. I just don't know. Let's go back to Ajira 316. One of the reasons I think they're on Hydra Island is because they found 3 Outriggers there. Now, we know that Alex had an Outrigger that she and Carl used to get back and forth. So it would make sense that these are the others Outriggers on Hydra Island. We also know that the pilot, Frank, and another woman took off with one of the Outriggers and the passenger Manifest. Now, who is that other woman? It could be Sun if Sun didn't flash back to the 70s. We still haven't seen her in the 70s yet. We haven't seen her or Saeed. We've only seen Jack, Kate, and Hurley confirmed in the 70s. Who else could it be? We know it's not Kate because she's in the 70s. We know it's not Juliet because she's in the 70s. It can't be any of the women that were the remaining survivors of 815, so it can't be Rose. It makes zero sense that it would be Claire, because the last we saw of Claire, she was with Christian, living in the cabin. It makes, and I'm not even sure that Frank and Claire ever crossed paths, so that doesn't make sense to me. So it's either Sun and she didn't flash, or it's Penny. Now, we don't think Penny was on Flight 316, but what if, for some reason, she and Desmond got on board that flight? Now, it's possible we might not have seen them in the airport. We saw everybody else, but maybe we didn't see them. Then maybe they're a surprise for us. Frank knows Penny. If Penny and Desmond got separated during the 316 crash, like if Penny stayed in 2008 and Desmond flashed back to 77, and that could happen because Desmond was returning to the island and Penny's never been, then they may have been separated, and maybe Penny could only trust Frank and they were off to find the orchid, maybe, or I don't know. I'm just spitballing. Anyway, they took an Outrigger. What else do we know about the 316 survivors? We know that at the same time that they found the water bottle, Locke and Sawyer and Juliet and Dan and Miles stole one of those Outriggers from Survivorville in an attempt to get around the island, at which point they were being pursued, presumably by the survivors of 316. And potentially by, like, Locke still might be with them. Like, how long does Locke stay with the survivors of 316? So was it possible Locke was chasing himself? That doesn't seem to make a ton of sense. But weirder things have happened on this show. Anyway, they are our island folk. They flashed to 1988. We know where they the same timeline as Danielle and her crew. Okay, that's one more post-it down. Okay, this one. I'm still not sure why some people were flashing through time when time was skipping and others weren't. Why didn't Richard skip through time? Richard didn't skip through time. Ethan didn't skip through time, so we sort of assume that none of the others skipped through time. But why did Juliet then skip through time? Who knows? But We also know that Charlotte's body didn't skip through time. When she died, she was left behind when Dan skipped next. So dead bodies don't skip through time. So what if Richard is reincarnated the way it's now apparently clear that Christian is and Locke is? And by being reincarnated, do they stop aging? Are they something other than alive, Are they sort of an eternal now? I don't know. And yet Christian flashed through time because he was there at the bottom of the well when the well suddenly closed up to talk to Locke and tell him how to get back to the real world. So Christian flashes through time, but Richard doesn't. Charlotte's I don't know. Not yet clear. And what about Claire? Was she jumping through time if Christian was jumping through time? Because is Claire sort of connected to Christian now? I don't know. And speaking of reincarnation, yes, I forget which episode, 5 or 6, I finally did the anagram of that van that Ben is driving around Los Angeles, Canton, Rainier. It's reincarnation. And Locke's body's in the back, so yes, Locke gets reincarnated. I don't think this is a matter of ghosts. This is proper reincarnation. Locke is brought back to life. He has his memories of his death. He knows who killed him. He takes it all very matter-of-factly, but yes, he goes, yeah, I guess this is what they were going to bury me in, when he looks at his suit. Reincarnation is a thing on the island, and therefore we can assume that Christian has been reincarnated too. He isn't a vision, he isn't a specter or a ghost or just something that the smoke monster has animated. He's been reincarnated. He is still alive. We assumed when we first saw him way back in season 1, when Jack was exhausted and hallucinating, that he was a hallucination. But maybe he is actually freaking alive. After all, his coffin was empty. So that brings us to the temple and the smoke monster. Because we also saw what happened to Danielle and her crew when they first reached the island. They got attacked by the smoke monster. It dragged one of them into the temple. This is the first time we've actually seen the temple. And I think we can assume that this is the same temple that the others were heading to for refuge, which means the others have a connection with the smoke monster. We kind of assumed that, but this is where the smoke monster lives, and it's where the others feel safe. They can go down there and they're not going to be attacked. They're not going to be killed. And we also saw, after all of Danielle's crew, minus her, went down into the temple to rescue the one friend who had his arm ripped off, they came back. They were on the beach, and it wasn't until later that Danielle killed them because they were infected. Now, if you remember what Robert said to Danielle in that episode, he said, he told her that it's not a monster. The smoke monster is not a monster. It is the security system for the island. And Danielle clung to that information because that's what we heard from her back in season 1 about what the smoke monster was. It's a security system. It's protecting the island. And yet, it definitely did something to Danielle's crew. Infect might be the wrong word, but it interacted with them to make them part of its team, to make them allies in protecting the island. Robert was going to kill his wife carrying his unborn child to protect the island. he was going to do that. And Danielle outsmarted him by giving him the gun without a firing pin. But otherwise, she'd be dead because her partner was going to kill her. So the smoke monster has done something to them to make them protectors of the island. And if the others feel safe in the temple as well, then we can assume that at least some of the others have been similarly infected. And if that's the case, we really have to wonder about which of our survivors that have had interactions with the smoke monster and survived, whether they were similarly affected. Now, we know that Mr. Echo had some interesting interactions with the smoke monster, but ultimately it decided he wasn't worthy because he came out and said, I do not regret being a murderer. I did it to save my brother, and that didn't mesh with the smoke monster's ideals, the island's view of good and wrong, good and evil. But Locke, all the way back in early season 1, had his interaction with the smoke monster while he was off hunting boar by himself. And we didn't know what it was at the time. We only knew its POV. But Locke came back after that, maybe a changed man. Maybe now on the island's side. Maybe that was his epiphany. And it's more than just him having the realization that this island is special, but it's a tighter connection with the island through the smoke monster. Maybe Locke is infected the same way. So maybe he very much is, he's been made an ally of the island ever since that encounter early in season 1. So there's my theory. Clearly, there's a huge underground network throughout the island because there's the temple that goes down, there's the entrance from Otherville through Ben's secret room. There's the hole that the smoke monster was trying to drag Locke down at the end of season 2. And a lot of these entrances are also marked with hieroglyphs. We know that there's been an ancient presence on the island. There's these old temples. There's this statue, which we've seen standing in one of our quick record type skips. The smoke monster is ancient. I don't think this is particularly surprising right now, but things are just sort of falling into place and becoming a little clearer. It's directly connected with protecting the island. The others seem to have a connection with it. After all, Ben managed to call the smoke monster when Kimi and the mercenaries had Otherville surrounded. Looking forward to learning more about the temple is my point. Some people in the comments section on my Patreon, because we're ahead on Patreon, guys. We're about 6 episodes ahead on Patreon right now. So if you do want to get ahead and see more reactions because you just can't wait for my next one, check it out. Patreon.com/NeilTalks. And one of my commenters there was talking about the moment when Locke is descending the well on the rope that Sawyer's holding. There's a flash, and suddenly the rope is encased in solid earth, and Locke plummets and breaks his leg. Not so much about the Locke side of it, but that there is now rope encased, like leading down into the earth. And whether that might be the impetus to dig the well in the first place and discover the wheel. It's an interesting theory, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I think I lean away from it because my understanding of how the flashes were working, and by all means, discuss this in the comments section, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts on which side you fall on this. Was that anything that they were wearing or carrying or in flashed with them? That explains how the Zodiac made the flash. It explains how the Outrigger and their clothes and their weapons flashed with them. It explains why the rope flashed with Sawyer when the well disappeared. But I feel like the Zodiac, for instance, flashed with them multiple times, even when people weren't in it. Once it was sort of part of the flashing property, it continued to flash with them. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my recollection of how it shook out. In which case, the rope would continue to flash as well when Locke turned the wheel, for instance. And so the rope would flash into 1974. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's another Bootstrap paradox, and the rope leading down into the earth was, in fact, what prompted people to dig it out and discover the wheel chamber down below. Maybe. It's also hemp rope, so unless, people would have had to have discovered it soon after that incident, otherwise it would just rot away in a tropical jungle. Debate, discuss. I'm here to prompt you guys to have thoughts you may not have had yet. All right, and on that note, let's go to my last post-it. We've discovered some interesting family connections, and I have theories about a few more. Let's go back to the nosebleeds. As our group was flashing through time, Dan had a theory that nosebleeds, how quickly they hit you, was related to how much time you had already spent on the island, which explained Charlotte getting them first. She was born on the island. We know that she was there probably as about a 5-year-old or so before Dan in 1974 told her that she had to leave the island or she would die. We haven't actually seen that yet, but we can assume that will happen in coming episodes. The next person to get nosebleeds was Miles, who's from Encino, man. So, has Miles spent time on the island? Well, Miles is about 30 years old-ish. We know he's Asian. Do we know of any Asian kids born on the island in the late 70s? Yes, we do. Dr. Chang has a newborn baby on the island in the late 70s. We saw it in our flashback at the start of episode 1 of season 5. So I think Miles was born on the island as well. And he's Dr. Chang, aka Marvin Candle's son. Theory number 1. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this theory yet or not, but another interesting connection. We know Charles Widmore and Ellie were both on the island back in the 50s, in the days of Jughead, of a similar age. We know Ellie eventually left the island and started studying space-time and it was Dan's mother. We know Charles Widmore financed Dan's research. I wouldn't be surprised if Charles is Dan's father. Theory 2. Who were Charlotte's parents? We know she's on the island. We know her mother took her off the island, presumably leaving her father behind. Is her father Horace? Who else do we know that's recently had a child again in the 70s, on the island. Horace lost his wife, didn't? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's not Horace. Just a theory. Okay, I think that's it for notes. I don't know how long I've been going. I'm excited to watch episode 9. And this one's called Namaste.